certainly appreciate you coming. We're here today to discuss the first of two complaints that is going to be filed against candidate Andy Sanborn. One complaint is going to go to the Attorney General's office, and the second, which we'll produce over the next 24 hours, is going to be filed with the Federal Elections Commission. And they are as a result of a mailer that went out that violated both state and federal election laws. During my speakership of the New Hampshire House, and in the 6 years since I've been Speaker, I've avoided any direct criticism of members of my party and involvement in campaign controversies. I know primaries exist in a landscape that's ripe for misunderstanding and unfounded concerns. I've held to this rule even as Andy Sanborn in my district ran against one of the state's premier advocates of fiscal and pension reform, Ken Hawkins. As you all remember, Andy came into the district, decided he should run for state senate, and his way to run for state senate is to take a person that I had made chairman of the Pension Reform Committee, vice chairman of Executive Departments and Administrative Committee, a real advocate for New Hampshire, and treated him to a series of mailers that contained distortions and, quite frankly, lies, that as I would receive them at my house, I was shocked. Now, at the time, I didn't say anything. I regret that. I thought to myself, well, this is sort of the business we're in, and Ken can deal with that. It wasn't right. And yet, the pattern continues as when we look at this mailer, which so obviously came from the Sanborn campaign. Font is the same as his mailers. The postage indicia is the same as his mailers. Color schemes, the rhetoric, citation, it's clear that it comes from his campaign. And so I'm not going to allow another veteran to be dealt with, a military veteran to be dealt with as my good friend Ken Hawkins was. I'm not going to allow a mailer that equates government, military service and service in our law enforcement at the state level to being a government insider. That's a very sort of distortion that voters should not have to deal with. And so I've decided to step forward, and I'm very glad to be able to do so. Now, there's others who have come forward and want to also speak to this complaint. So I'm going to turn to all of them. But I would ask you to remember one thing. This is a persistent pattern. This is not the way politics should be conducted in New Hampshire. We, as those who have run for office and those who have to vote for those to run for office, deserve better. And with that in mind, I'm going to recognize Karen Testman, who we all know, the former chairwoman of Cornerstone, a great conservative advocate.
Thank you all for coming, and thank you, Bill, for allowing me to offer some support for Eddie. Basically, I was the founder and former executive chairman of Cornerstone Policy Research. I also founded First Principles and have held the sanctity of life as a very high ideal that is expressed in our Declaration of Independence. It specifically says that that is a right that's given to us by God and not to be removed by any man. My own personal experience with Senator Sanborn has been that as the executive director of Cornerstone, I've asked many times over to sit down with him and find out where he stood on the various issues that impact our families. While often promised to sit down and talk with me, it never materialized. Despite what it says in this mailer, since the first time I sat down with Eddie Edwards, he has assured me over and over and demonstrated to me in his rhetoric and his willingness to answer any questions that I put forward to him that he is 100% pro-life. I find it offensive that Mr. Sanborn seems to want to vilify him in this area, especially since he has endorsed, in fact, Planned Parenthood, which we know destroys human life. On the campaign trail, I have observed behavior by Mr. Sanborn that I find very offensive to me as a woman and to my fellow female constituents. And so I ask that you would consider this as you're going forward. As a former candidate for governor, I also know that this is an issue that is near and dear to the people of New Hampshire, that they do believe that life is precious and that we should be protecting it in all phases. And I do believe that Mr. Edwards is the kind of candidate who continues to have integrity, character, and a desire to fight for human life wherever, at all stages. Thank you very much. Oh, by the way, I did want to say that I have endorsed Mr. Edwards for CD's District 1. Sorry.
Thank you, Karen. Neither Andy Sanborn nor I are veterans of military service. We ought to, therefore, tread very carefully before we speak disparaging of the military service of another. In particular, as the son of a veteran of 3 wars for our country, I take, and I'm sure many of us here take offense at it. And so I've asked Sergeant Major Paul Chevalier to speak to that.
Thank you, Bill. Well, for more than the past 20 years, I've been a member of the VFW Legislative Committee in Washington, and they no longer endorse any candidates, but they encourage us to go out on the hunt for candidates that have veteran status and have served in the military. And to find good ones, hopefully so we'll get them to Congress, and they will have a better knowledge of what goes on with the defense appropriations and veterans bills. So, having said that, I speak for myself and not an official VFW talk today. But I've known Eddie Edwards for more than 20 years also. And I know him in 2 different categories. I know him as a candidate the past couple of years, and I know him as the liquor inspector for the New Hampshire Liquor Commission. I was very much involved with a number of VFWs that had liquor licenses and canteens. So we got to know, they all got to know Eddie Edwards as the liquor inspector. And everybody knew that Eddie Edwards did the job fairly. He always gave things a very honest look, and was always there to give you a warning if you were doing something wrong. Everybody had him in high respect. He's come to the VFW conventions here 2 years in a row, and he's left there as a hero with the great story he has to tell, which we all believe. But there's only 2 groups of people that wake up in the morning with a weapon by their side and go to work with a target on them, and those are active duty military and police officers. Eddie's done both of these jobs in a remarkable manner, and anybody that could refer to him as I forget the term they used in the mail. Yeah, government insider and a regulator. I mean, that's about as far from a military or police officer's career as I can think of. So I would tell you that I personally endorse Eddie Edwards, and I think he's a great candidate, and he tells the truth, and I'll do all I can to help support him.
Thank you, Paul. My party believes an ordered liberty. An ordered liberty comes through an appropriate law enforcement function within society. And again, as Paul was referencing, to disparage the service of those who allow us to go into our homes at night and live with safety is just something that I don't think any voters in New Hampshire, let alone voters from the first congressional district we want to count as. And we've asked Mike Selecki to come and speak to that.
Thank you. I'm proud to be here today to support Eddie. Eddie's a friend of mine, not only in law enforcement, but in life. Quick background on me, for some of you that don't know me. I've been in law enforcement for 27 years here in New Hampshire. I started my career in Colebrook and went through the ranks, became a police chief up there. I left Colebrook 1999, went down to Hancock as a police chief. And then from Hancock, I went over to Ringe, was a police chief over there, and I retired out of Kensington a couple of years ago. It was over 21 years I've sat on multiple boards and committees throughout the state. Eddie's been on many of those with me. I'm past president of the New Hampshire Chiefs Association. Eddie and I ran a lot of legislative issues during my time there as a police chief representative. I was also past president of the New Hampshire Foster Parent Association for many years. So as you can see, I'm also a veteran. I served 7 years in the United States Army. And that's okay, Eddie, I know you were in the Navy. So, but it's great. I mean, as a police officer, we all know, right? What's a police officer's job? We protect and serve. We're not bureaucrats. We work with members of our community. We see an issue, not only as a veteran, but as a law enforcement officer. We deal with those quickly. We're not a bureaucrat. We don't spend hours and months and years talking about it. We deal with it. We work nights, we work weekends, we work holidays, and we take a lot of time away from our family, and we spend that in the community. I have 2 police officers in my family. My youngest daughter is a police officer, my oldest son is a police officer. I'm very proud of what we do. Being a police officer and serving our country is the most noblest job you'll ever have, and Eddie understands that more than anybody. We've seen a lot here in New Hampshire. We've seen politics go good, and we've seen politics go bad. And this flyer that Senator Sanborn put out it's a sham. It's shameful that anybody in New Hampshire treats anybody that way running in politics. So just quickly, I don't want to end up, you know what a police officer does. What's the definition of a bureaucrat? An official in government department, in particular one perceived as being concerned with procedural correctness. Perceived as procedural correctness. That's the problem with bureaucrats. They don't really understand it. They've never worked the street. They've never served our country, many of them, and that's shameful. Eddie's done it all. We've been there. We've lost a lot of friends over our time here in New Hampshire. So I'm very proud to be here today in support of Eddie, not only personally but professionally. And, again, I know Senator Sanborn, and this is not the way we do things here in New Hampshire. Thank you.
Thank you. In my travels around the country, speaking on behalf of the state, I've discovered it's known for its understanding of a right to self-defense, the genius of the Second Amendment. And I've looked forward to Eddie Edwards going to Congress and taking that message to Congress. And so it was particularly distressing to see the distortions in this mailer that somehow allude to that he's not that advocate that we're looking for. So we've invited some folks here to talk about that. We have Senator Bob Clegg will speak to it, and with him is Victoria Sullivan. I think you're Assistant Majority Leader. Am I right?
Yes. So then we
that. And Susan also.
Thank you. For those of you who don't know me, I was in the House for 8 years. I was Speaker Pro Tem, and I spent, that's fine. I spent 6 years in the Senate, 4 as Majority Leader, and I'm also the President of Pro-Gun New Hampshire and have been for probably 6 years now. And I can tell you that in the 20 years that I've been around, and I had 14 years in the legislature that I dealt with Ed, I can tell you that he's a solid guy, and he's also solid on the Second Amendment. The fact that a group called New Hampshire Firearms Coalition had a question that basically said, if you pistol whipped your wife or your domestic partner, should you lose your gun? And most people would say yes, but that was the wrong answer for them. They also have a president who fought, Alan Rice fought the Constitution carry. He also fought Senate Bill 500 because in it said that if you shot your domestic partner with an air rifle, it was considered to be a gun, and Alan thought that his members should be able to use an air rifle to shoot their domestic partner, and we shouldn't have put it in the law. Eddie's a different guy, honesty and integrity. And I know that Andy uses some other issues about Eddie's service, I was there, and I can tell you that when Eddie left the service of the state, it was because of his honesty and because of his integrity that he left. He was probably the best investigator the state ever had. He did much for the Liquor Commission. He did much for the state of New Hampshire, saving us money. And when it comes to the Second Amendment, it's not just the Second Amendment that Eddie stands up for, it's the entire Constitution. Right to free speech, the right to the press, everything. And I know when Eddie goes to Congress, he's gonna stand up for all of the Constitution, not just pieces. So I've endorsed Eddie, and so have most of my friends.
As have I. Good afternoon. I'm here today in support of Eddie Edwards to say that I'm disappointed in the way that Senator Sanborn's campaign has attacked a fellow Republican is an enormous understatement. Calling someone out for their voting record and actual experience is fair. Flat-out lies and manipulations are beneath us as a party. I'm here to speak specifically to the accusations that Eddie is not a defender of our Second Amendment rights. I'm a proud member of the Women's Defense League of New Hampshire. I am an NRA certified range safety officer and an NRA certified pistol instructor. In spite of my commitment to the Second Amendment, I too will receive an F grade from the same organization. As candidates, we receive a slew of surveys. We do not always have time to fill out every single one. If we do not fill out a survey for an organization, they usually give us an NG, a no grade, or a question mark. This is the only organization I know of that gives you an F for not bowing down to their will. They've developed a very bad reputation within the Second Amendment community. Therefore, many legislators have started to ignore them. They attack strong 2A legislators when they do not fold under the pressure of the group and go on vicious personal attacks in order to raise funds to further their destructive needs. Our founding fathers believed in fighting against this exact kind of tyranny, which is why it is so despicable that any group touting themselves as pro-2A would employ these tactics of intimidation. These are very serious times for our nation. The principles that formed the very foundation of our country are at risk. I have never before seen our Second Amendment rights attacked as they are today. I have had several conversations with Eddie. I know he's in favor of reciprocity of concealed carry. I know that he believes in our Second Amendment rights. I am 100% confident that he will defend our Second Amendment rights when he represents us in Washington. Thank you.
I think no one can better demonstrate that this is just the continuation of a pattern of campaigning upon a candidate who at this point should be told, go home, rethink how you deal with the voters in New Hampshire, and allow one of the best advocates New Hampshire's had an opportunity to vote for in years, Eddie Edwards, to go to Congress. And that person is Eddie Edwards himself. So, Eddie, good for you.
Thank you. First, I want to thank all of you for being here today. I'm here to join with my wife, and I certainly want to thank so many of my friends and supporters, people who've known me for a long time. Thank you so much for being here. You know, we've had the opportunity to hear much about Senator Sanborn. Senator Sanborn continues to distort my record, who I am, in his attempt to hide his incredibly shameful behavior at our state capitol. As you've heard today from some of our leading advocates, leading voices on gun issues, life issues, military, law enforcement, I am 100% supportive of our Second Amendment rights. But I'm 100% supportive of our constitutional rights. I am a pro-life candidate. I am proud of my Navy service, my law enforcement service. And I just think it's despicable that we would have someone running for Congress who would take shots at law enforcement and military service. Worse, we have a senator, in my opinion, who has demonstrated predatory behavior in our state house for quite some time. If you believe that Senator Sanborn simply told a joke, this is half, just like over half of the investigatory documentation from his behavior in the State House. If you read through these documents, you'll find that Senator Sanborn has difficult time controlling himself around young people. This is inconsistent with New Hampshire's values. It's inconsistent with the Republican Party. We are better than this as a state, and we are certainly better than this as a party. Senator Sanborn has trouble understanding that his pattern of behavior of preying on young female workers, young interns, is something that we reject here in New Hampshire. He's had a hard time recognizing that most victims do not come forward. Out of shame, embarrassment, fear that they would be blamed, lost job, economic opportunities. There are many reasons why victims don't come forward. But his behavior is appalling. It has cost the state thousands of dollars. I'm not sure which is more embarrassing, that we have to spend thousands of dollars to rewrite a state Senate sexual harassment policy because of one senator, or yet you'd have to tell a state senator that that behavior is inappropriate in the workplace. You and I, in any industry in this country, in this state, will be fired or not hired for demonstrating such behavior. I am ashamed that I have to be the one to step forward, with so many others. But it's time that we focus on character and not politics once again. I am very proud to be a conservative, very proud of that. I'm very proud of our legacy as a party. I'm very proud of our policies, of our principles. And I can tell you, Senator Sanborn does not reflect what the Conservative Party is about. He certainly does not reflect the values of Atlantic State. Thank you again for being here, and I'm happy to take a few questions.
I'm sorry, I must have missed the flyer. Could you talk about what the flyer is, what it looks like, what it says?
This is a flyer that Senator Sanborn put out. This is just one of them. There have been 3 such flyers. And they're full of, quite frankly, just lies. And I understand why he would put something out like this, because he's afraid to run on his own record. Of 8 years of, as I said before, preying on people in the State House, in our state capital, that he wants to use as his personal engagements, is wrong. So he puts out a flyer like this to distort the voters, to convince the voters somehow I am something that I'm not. And that's why I'm joining here today with so many of our leaders. These are some of the leading advocates in our state for these issues. And I am proud to have their support.
And can you just tell us why you know that it's from Andy Sanborn? Does it say his name on there, or?
Well, it doesn't say his name on it. And that's one of the problems. That's one of the violations that the Attorney General's office will be looking into, and as well as the federal government will be looking into. And we'll wait and see what they come back with. I believe this is a pattern of behavior. It's certainly, his name is on the other side of this document that he put this on. So there's no question in my mind, but I'll wait and see what the investigators come back with.
They've said that they've self-reported this flyer to the FEC with regard to the lack of a paid-for-by stamp. So they are acknowledging that it's theirs, and they are acknowledging that a mistake was made in that aspect of it. In terms of what it says, there's been no commentary. So I don't know if you have any comment on that.
Well, in terms of self-reporting, I'm certain that the Attorney General's office and others will look into a pattern of behavior. Someone who just ignores laws or believes that they don't apply to him, or rules don't apply to him. This continued behavior, this continued pattern of behavior, as we stated earlier, is attack on service. I've never seen anyone who is so disrespectful towards law enforcement in the military as this state senator. And he ignores laws. That's very clear. And so we'll wait and see what they come back with. This is a pattern of behavior.
When the Attorney General came out with this report, didn't target Senator Sanborn in this report, but it also made clear that it found no, wrongdoing by Senator Sanborn. Are you disappointed in the Attorney General's findings in that?
Well, I think we have to draw a distinction here what the Attorney General's office's investigation was for. I mean, what's come out of this is really pretty appalling, but the Attorney General's investigation was focused on whether the state Senate engaged in some type of collusion to cover up for Senator Sanborn's behavior. But we should not be under the impression that Senator Sanborn's behavior was cleared. It was not cleared. In fact, they spent nearly $4,000 rewriting the sexual harassment policy to bring it in line. And that's what I said before. I don't know if that's more alarming that you need a sexual harassment policy to tell someone you can't engage in that type of behavior in the workplace, or we didn't have it covered already. So to suggest that Senator Sanborn's behavior has been cleared, I don't think that's the case at all. And the fact of the matter is most victims will not come forward. I think we found in the documents that were released just recently, there was at least one person who suggested that why bother, because there's some type of tree of trust there. And I think that type of, I think what we have to realize here is that when young people engage in government, as young staffers or interns, they're looking for guidance. They're there to be mentored by effective legislators and leaders to learn from those folks. And to expose our young people in our state to this type of behavior is appalling. We should all be upset. And I think when you see some of the female elected officials who were there at that time and how they tried to work to protect other people in the workplace, we should all be concerned about that. So we shouldn't be suggesting, and I'm not saying you're suggesting that, but by no means have Senator Sanborn's behavior been cleared. He's tried to clear it, but his behavior has not been cleared.
Hey, Eddie, during our interview with Senator Sanborn, he mentioned the process the Liquor Commission and your office engaged in when you first opened this bar. And he said it was adversarial, it was too long, it was too bureaucratic. I wonder if you could comment on that experience and whether you think that experience is why he disparages you the way he does.
Sure. Again, Senator Sanborn continues a pattern of just dishonesty. If you look back at what I've done when I was there under my tenure, bringing transparency to the organization. Under my tenure, New Hampshire Liquor Enforcement became the first statewide law enforcement agency to be nationally accredited. I was the first liquor chief to put our fines and rule as been asked for by the legislature. We opened up our hiring process to the general public, to people who were in the business community. So Senator Sanborn used that as a political talking point, because you would notice if he really had a concern about the licensing process or about the process he went through, I haven't seen one piece of legislation he put in to address those issues, because they're not true. And this is more of the type of rhetoric that he spreads as a talking point. He, one thing he says he's proven to be a dishonest person. He's proven to be someone who is incapable of being around young people. He's proven himself to be someone whose values are inconsistent with those that we expect here in the Granite State.
If this is something that you all acknowledge that you've known for years about him, why now?
Well, first of all, I don't know if you've heard a lot of people here say they've known about this for years.
Mr. O'Brien had said that there was an incident beforehand, so I didn't know if, why come out now?
I think as you heard me say, my choice is to try to not promote controversy, try to not acknowledge negative campaigning. And I watched it happen to a very, very good man, using the same type of distortions, the same type of lies, and thought at the time, should they get involved? I was Speaker of the House, and I thought, that's not appropriate. But after that election, I vowed, if I see this happen again, I'm going to step forward. It's happened again. So, really what the difference is the reoccurrence of this type of behavior on the part of candidate Sanborn. And it's appropriate that, at least in my case, that I now step forward and say to the voters and the people in New Hampshire, this can't go on. This is not the way you get elected in New Hampshire.
Eddie, I want to read, I'm with the content monitor, I wanted to read a line from this letter near the end. It says, using the prosecutorial authority of your office, you could discourage others in this and future election cycles from turning to such negativity and dishonesty. I wanted to first ask a two-part question. First, what are you kind of hoping for in terms of prosecutorial powers? What do you hope comes out of if this is investigated by the Attorney General? And what do you see as the balance between kind of freedom of speech and political discourse and a healthy election and
Sure.
what you're asking for here?
Sure. this is one of the things I've been talking about since I started my campaign in April 2017. We have to get back to a place that we have character in our culture, so that our young people who grow up in our communities understand that you can expect more of adults, particularly those who have stepped forward to be leaders in our community. So by going after folks who have actually put themselves in a position to continue to lie and mislead the general public, it has to be addressed at some point. Or else we'll continue down a pattern of behavior that's more destructive to our culture and our community than we can stand for. And for me, my entire life I spent fighting against what other people told me to do that would make my life easier, a lot easier, from the time I was a child to now. And I've always had to take what I believe to be the right thing, to do the right thing. And holding Senator Sanborn accountable is the right thing to do. Even though some people may disagree, holding him accountable for his behavior, his attack on young people, his attack on our state, his attack on our values as a party, it's appalling to me. At some point, you have to take on people like this and hold them accountable for their behavior. I'm not interested in disrupting Senator Sanborn's freedom of speech or anyone else's. He has freedom of speech, but you also have to be held accountable for your behavior. He's engaged in a pattern of behavior that's unbecoming of any elected official. He's engaged in a pattern of behavior that's inconsistent with our state. No one in this room would demonstrate such behavior. No one.
But some would argue though that accountability is better placed at the ballot box and not through an arm of state government. How would you respond to that kind of criticism?
See, this is how we let people off. There's always a lot of excuses why we shouldn't do it this way, why we shouldn't do it that way. At some point, accountability has to be throughout the system. And when voters are being manipulated and lied to, that's when you have to step forward too. That's why most of these people are here today, because we're trying to change the system. You can't change Washington or any other political system until you change how you elect people, until you change the people you send there. And so if we're gonna sit back and relax and wait for these things to be revealed to the public, it's not gonna happen. I didn't enter this race to start lying and manipulating people. Senator Sanborn has abused his authority in our state house for far too long.
Sure. So the U.S. Supreme Court has addressed the First Amendment issue, and it draws a distinction between advocacy, that is issue advocacy, and express advocacy, which talks about whether a candidate should be elected or not elected. And there's the functional equivalent of that, which is basically you don't say don't vote for me, you go after me in an election, personally go after me. And the Supreme Court has said that voters deserve something there. They deserve to be told who's doing the speaking and who's paying for that speaking. Sanborn campaign spoke. It paid for that speech through these mailers and through using the same postage indicia that he uses on all its mailings. But then it chose to hide behind a veil of anonymity, because most of us who are in this particular field understand that if you want to say something negative, see if you can get it out without it being attributed to you, because it will hurt you. People don't like it. It will hurt you as much as you hope to hurt the candidate. That's what's going on here. The fact that he's now been called out and he rushes up to Concord to report himself isn't sufficient. The pattern is here. The pattern has to stop now.
So, in terms of,
One more question.
this isn't gonna be popular in this room, but, you know, there will be some who say that you're being a little bit disingenuous because you are solidly behind President Trump, who is known for having made some quite disparaging and remarks. Some of the remarks you've made, some have applied to the President of the United States, who you're fully behind. You've said that he's apologized, but some would even argue with to what degree he's apologized for the Access Hollywood tape.
Well, I can only tell you that what I saw the president do regarding the Access Hollywood tape, he recognized his behavior at that point was inappropriate. The president stepped forward and did apologize. He said that wasn't consistent with the person he was. The difference here is that we've lost the ability to draw distinctions. He's apologized now. Whether you want to accept the president's apology or not, it's another matter. But at least he recognizes that behavior and apologized for it. This is a senator who does not recognize his behavior. This is a senator who blames his ethnicity on his behavior. He suggests I'm an Irish person, so I say these things. And so to me, I find this lack of ability to draw a distinction, and I understand your question, I appreciate it. But somehow every Republican has to address what the president has already apologized for in the knowledge. We're talking about a person here in the Granite State who represents the Granite State of New Hampshire, who has refused to even acknowledge one bit that he's sorry for his behavior. In fact, I think on 2 or 3 different occasions by the press, he was given an opportunity to apologize. He ignored it. And again, it went on about somehow pretending that if the Ortiz takes one high enough side or Tom Brady takes a hit from behind, somehow he gets upset by that. Well, we all do. We all don't use that type of behavior though. That's the point here. So thank you again for being here. I really appreciate it.
Thank you.
Thank you.
Thank you.